Greetings, Kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and welcome back to our world of darkness and level by level, where in this playlist we are going to start going over the ins and outs of animalism and how exactly it is used by Kindred in the world of darkness in the Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition setting. This discipline can be used by pretty much any Kindred who has the proper predator type, as always, but it is primarily used by the Gangrel, the Nosferatu, and the Tzimisce vampire clans. This is a discipline that I think would help most Kindred, but I can understand why a lot of socialite Kindred, such as the Ventrue and the Toreador, would not choose to practice such a primal power. I love the nicknames. First off, I'd like to go over those. The Doolittling, Taming, and Bestiae Sermo it's just such a very interesting thing to hear people call this. I would actually love to hear someone use that as the nicknames in a game at some point. I can see someone go, "What are you doing?" and then somebody else looking up and go, Doolittling. That would be just a very interesting thing to see. The book states, perhaps the vampire has more in common with animals than human. A dangerous set of instincts drives them, and it takes a lot for them to withhold the urge to just lash out. Much like a wild dog on a chain, a vampire's beast will never truly be tamed. Some Kindred find a way of becoming one with their beasts. Those who do are the masters of animalism. Some accompany the use of this power with howls, snarls, and roars, or communication with animals in the animal's language, though this is an affectation and not a necessity. The animalism discipline sees much use among vampires who struggle to fit in or have no taste for living among mortals. Often classed as one of Cain's gifts of utility, allowing a vampire to thrive on unrefined blood, or form companionship with non-sapient beings. It is also a devastating weapon against vampires who cling to their towers, and against inquisitors who suspect their enemy will only come on two legs. A swarm of blood-hungry rats invading a Kindred's penthouse haven. The animalism proficient vampire who cows the sheriff's beast in Elysium, or the beady-eyed raven that spies on the Society of Leopold's chapter, all serve to strengthen animalism practitioners and weaken their foes. Out of all of the disciplines, I have to say that animalism has, throughout the various editions of Vampire the Masquerade, always been a favorite of mine, and also seems to be the most neglected when it comes to the way people play games. I actually played in a game one time when there was somebody who based a character, and I'm not a fan of the portrayal, but based a character off of Ace Ventura as a caitiff, and didn't even take animalism. Why? Like, I'm not big into the idea of comedy characters when it comes to, for comedy's sake, characters, but I think we've all played in a game at least once where somebody was basing a character directly off of a movie or off of a character from an anime series or something like that, where they do their best to recreate them as best as they can. Another famous duo that was actually in a game that I played in was somebody actually brought in Jay and Silent Bob from the View Askew universe, where they actually had Jay as a Brujah and Silent Bob as a Tremere with movement of the mind because he was trying to float the cigarette and mall rats and stuff. That all made sense, and it was good for a laugh and a little bit of comedy distraction, but it was also something that didn't last very long. But the person who actually created a character who is based off of the idea of being able to communicate and relate to animals, as well as an Ace Ventura, and didn't even take Animalism. It's just a really sad, that was a waste of potential, where they could have taken a character that, yes, has its origins and comedy leanings, could have very well ended up being a driving force in a game. The idea of Willard, the person who is a social outcast, who is just trying to exist, but then finds that they have a certain connection with rats and is able to send them to do their own bidding, is something that should be seen in these games more often among Thinbloods and Caitiff. People who are ostracized not only in human society but also in kindred society, where you don't have anybody else to bond with but these animals. And I don't understand why I don't see that more often. And I just realized how emotional I'm getting over that, and I apologize. That's not what I'm trying to do here. But it is something that is, it's kind of a mystery to me. I don't quite understand exactly why these aspects are not seen more often in games. Because animalism does have its place, and it can be a rather terrifying discipline if utilized properly. So let us go over the characteristics of animalism, shall we? By default, animalism powers involving animals can only be used on vertebrates. Additionally, any use of the ability on herbivores. Add 1 to the difficulty of skills rolled involved. That's interesting too, because I think that in the old games that I played in, we did have a rule of thumb that it really could only be used on predators and scavengers. And the idea that it is a little bit more difficult to relate to something that's a vegetarian when you're dealing with the beast within is kind of interesting, because they are going to automatically see you as a predator. Now, I think that if you're interacting with anything, a dog, a cat, a wolf, whatever, they are also going to see you as a predator because you're the bigger animal at that point. But they also have a better understanding of you. You all have the same goals in mind, to survive and thrive and to kill. When it comes to dealing with something like a rabbit, on the other hand, yeah, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because the convincing is going to be a little harsher. The idea of I'm a big bad wolf and you're a bunny, you're not really going to see those two talking that very often. So it's nice that they put that in on the rules, and the fact that it's only a 1-point difficulty instead of being just impossible is also a very nice additive, considering the fact that if you're investigating a kidnapping or something like that and the child had some kind of pet in the room, that you might actually be able to discuss with them, regardless if you're talking about a dog or a caged rabbit. The type, animalism is a mental discipline. That makes a lot of sense. I think it could also be considered a social, but as social as animals are, they do kind of communicate on a different level, almost on a telepathic level more than anything else. Masquerade threat. We are looking at a low to medium threat. While talking to animals might seem eccentric, only in the most violent applications of the discipline elicit more than a few raised eyebrows. How many times have we walked down the road and saw someone talking to their pet? How many times have we talked to our pets? I know I have full-on conversations with my animals. I have a few in the house, and yeah, we do tend to have a full-on conversations, and they are a bit one-sided. But I do feel that I can at least understand slightly what they mean, and vice versa. Blood resonant. We are looking at animal blood, preferably feral. So, animal blood that you get from domesticated animals is not going to help out quite as much. You might have to drink more to an extent of harming the animal to be able to learn what you need to gain a heightened sense of animalism through feeding. But if you're feeding from wild animals, non-domesticated animals, this actually brings to mind the idea of vampires who keep herds of cattle. Yes, that's animals, but they're domesticated. They're not exactly living the wild life. They're not exactly worried that they're going to be attacked most of the time, or they're not wondering where their next meal's coming from if you're feeding them on the regular basis. Whereon, if you are out in the woods and you're hunting down the wild predators that you yourself are trying to emulate, you're going to have a much better position at gaining the abilities of animalism. I am incredibly excited to go over the various powers of animalism. The fact that it states that by default, powers involving animalism are used on vertebrates only, considering the fact that we just went over our first amalgam discipline, which was, in fact, unliving hive, where you're actually using your animalisms on invertebrates. So keep in mind that where it says by default animalism powers are used only on vertebrates, there are always exceptions to this. And if you are planning on writing your own powers or your own amalgam powers with work on your storyteller, keep your imagination open, because there is always something that you can do to bypass what the book says is the typical. I am Voivode Maquette, and this has been an introduction to animalism. Class dismissed.